Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. Again, I'm Amber Hefner. I am the Executive Director of Illinois Digital Educators Alliance. And I want to just give a big shout out and thank you to Illinois School Counselors Association, who also partnered with us and promoted this webinar. So shout out to all the school counselors out there, former school counselor here. So very much in my heart with all of the work that school counselors do. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our partners at EVERFI, who are going to be sharing information with us today. So Rachel, take it over.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Amber. Yes, and thank you to all the work that our counselor community does. I mean, it's just such a huge role that you all play. So we're just very grateful. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that hopefully everyone can see. Can everyone see where it says combating substance abuse with EVERFI? Is that coming through?
Yep, we can see it.
Wonderful. I'm going to hit that present button too, so that's bigger for you all. So we do have about an hour with you all, and this is pretty jam-packed in terms of what we're going to be covering. So we will be moving pretty quickly, but we're hoping that this is going to be a real collaborative time. So once this loads, then I can move along here. My computer's been just a little slow today, but hopefully there it goes. All right. So combating substance abuse with EVERFI. So glad that you are all here today. We are your EVERFI Illinois team. We have my colleagues and myself listed on the screen. We also have some folks subbing in. So we do have Michelle on the line. Of course, you see Michelle's picture there as a regional implementation lead. She helps support school districts on the kind of the southern part of Illinois. But we also have Erica Hart, who's out in Kansas City, who's coming in to help us support us because we have some other colleagues in different other obligations. And so, but this is the folks you'll typically hear from. So I wanted to make sure to include their names. So again, myself being Rachel Henry, an implementation lead. I'm actually based out of Dubuque, Iowa, but support Western Illinois school districts. Heather Miller, Megan Moran, and Jonathan Barnes, as well as Michelle. These are names that you'll see across sort of your inbox as we send you messages to support you all with the resources. So glad to be here today. Just a couple of housekeeping tips. Just know that the chat is active and live. And what's really great is because I have my colleagues Eric and Michelle on, we're here to answer your questions in real time. So as you have them, don't hesitate to ping them in and we'll get those answered for you. Also follow us on social if you don't already. So we have our @EVERFI K12. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We have some really fun Instagram reels if anyone's into that. Yeah, you can catch us over there. And then of course, we love our hashtag EVERFI Empowers because that's what we're in the business to do, is empower you and your students with critical skills education. So going forward to next slide here. I'd love to hear about you all. What are your current roles in education? Are you an administrator, a teacher, counselor? We don't even have a counselor listed here, but that's really important. Are you a counselor, technology director, or whatever your role is that you play in your school district? We'd love to hear. So feel free to drop that in the chat just so we can all connect with one another. So again, if you're looking for the chat, remember it's at the very bottom of your Zoom. There's a chat option there. So we'd love to hear everyone's role. So I see these coming in. We have Andrea as a counselor, awesome. We have a couple high school teachers, administrator, counselors, wonderful. Excellent. So yeah, that's wonderful to connect. And again, so glad you're here. We really do feel like there is something for everyone when it comes to the EVERFI resources, and also just obviously tackling this topic of combating substance abuse. It really does take the whole village of the school system to help support in this. And so we're so glad to have folks from various backgrounds, social worker, Isabella, so glad to have you here. So awesome. So where we're headed today is we kind of gone into intros, but we're going to give you a little more overview of just who EVERFI is in case you've never worked with us in the past. Then we're going to talk about the scope of the challenge. I'm going to hand that off to Erica to really chat about like where are we when it comes to fighting substance abuse, combating that. We have a bunch of statistics to help show you where we are in that endeavor, but also how COVID has impacted this, which it totally has. We can't talk about substance abuse prevention without talking about the challenges of COVID. Then we're going to talk about prevention resources. Michelle's going to cover that, so you know exactly what's in your catalog and in your toolbox as it relates to EVERFI and what we have for those prevention resources. Then I'm going to follow up with some additional tools that you will be able to take advantage of. And then finally, then we'll get into that breakout room piece, which is what we will have available based on if your school is integrated with us via Clever or not. So we will get there in a second. And that is basically the how to get access to EVERFI. So that's what's coming at the end. So let's talk about the overview. So here at EVERFI, we are your partners in whole child learning. We create digital online programs that are supplemental, and they really cover those core kind of critical life skills that we know all students need around things like financial literacy, career and college readiness, health and wellness, so important, SEL, and not just those knowledge pieces, but also the skills associated with those topics. What's really cool about the programs themselves is that they have pre and post assessments that get automatically graded. So this takes the burden of grading off of yourself. You're able to analyze the data, see where students are at, and students love it too because they get automatic feedback on how they're doing in terms of their checks for understanding. You also have local support, which is, again, all of your implementation specialists and leads that were listed on that first slide. We're here to help support. This isn't necessarily like we show you the programs and then we're gone. We're here the whole year. Everything from being your thought partner when we're talking about like what your curriculum priorities are, or how we can help with these really important challenges like substance abuse prevention. But then also those technical things. So being able to help reset student passwords, if there's any technical issues, we're here for that as well. And then lastly, we are always free. It's the best news I get to share. So we work with some amazing partners here locally in the state of Illinois and in your communities, but also across the nation. So you're going to see some of their logos on the different programs that you get access to, and that's just acknowledging who's providing the funding for those resources. So this is EVERFI in a nutshell. And I wanted to give y'all just, again, very high level numbers around how EVERFI has been used across the state of Illinois. So we had almost 99,000 students use one or more of the EVERFI resources last year. And that we had over 1,700 teachers implement and over 900 schools use those resources. And then I'm just highlighting below the logos of some of our sponsors. Again, these sponsors make it possible for all the programs to be no cost, unlimited student licenses, and ongoing professional development, similar to what we are providing here today. So another chat for you in the chat, if you could, or another poll question. So in the chat, if you could answer, what is the most pressing educational need for your school community related to prevention? So this is where we'd love to hear from you. Do you feel like the most pressing need is around vaping in terms of educational need, prescription drugs, opioids? Do you think it's underage drinking, illegal drugs, or maybe it's something else entirely? We'd love to hear from you. So again, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind maybe dropping one of these words in that you think is the most pressing need. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I'm just seeing right off the bat here, vaping, absolutely. Alcohol use, underage drinking. Yeah, vaping, that's a good point too. Yeah, Amber brings up kids think it's safer. Yeah, so definitely big issues there. So yeah, feel free to keep dropping those in the chat. And then I'm gonna pass this off to Erica to take us through the scope of the challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So yeah, I want to take just a few minutes here to kind of talk about what we're up against, the scope of this challenge when we're talking about prevention education. So we can move on to the next slide. And so hey, let's start off with some good news. So based on the National Institute of on Drug Abuse, they put out a survey kind of along with the University of Michigan. And it's a survey called Monitoring the Future, where they survey young people both in high school and college. And they kind of in their one of their more recent surveys that was published there was a good news on a couple of fronts. So one is that high-risk drinking is down in high schools, and we are tracking the same trends at college, where we've identified a 44% decline in high-risk drinking since 2005 among incoming college students. There's also starting to see declines in prescription and over-the-counter drug misuse, with students reporting the lowest rates since the survey was administered. And yes, I've seen some questions come in. Oh, that's Michelle. But yeah, it's so as we're going in, yeah, please engage with in the chat that Michelle's the questions that Michelle's chatting in, because I think that some of these findings are really, really surprising and interesting to me when I was seeing these as well. And then moving on to the next slide. So we've got some good news, but by no means have we solved this challenge. So even within the EVERFI resources, we have identified one of the reasons that we cannot afford to take our foot off the gas in kind of these critical issues when talking about prevention education. So for example, with prescription drug use or misuse, excuse me, in high school, nearly a quarter of students have been prescribed an opioid, 20% a stimulant, and 13% a depressant. And so by the time some of these students arrive on campus at the college level, those numbers increase, particularly with opioids. So the exposure to many of these substances, whether prescribed or unprescribed, is a lot more prevalent kind of in students' lives. And I'll move on to the next slide. All right. And as mentioned in the chat, and to that poll question, we're entering a new era of a new public health challenge. And it's maybe not necessarily brand new, but we can see here on this slide how incredibly pervasive this behavior of vaping and e-cigarettes has become. So nearly 2 in 5 students in 12th grade report the past year vaping. Which is raising concerns about the impact on brain health and the potential for addiction. One thing of importance to note is the question of what teens are vaping. So for 12th graders, nicotine is most often vaped, with flavoring coming in second. And then for 8th graders, just flavoring is the most popular, which certainly speaks volumes about the effectiveness of marketing efforts. I'm a former marketing teacher, so that part always stands out to me. It speaks volumes about the effectiveness of the marketing efforts that were supposedly aimed at adults. Another important piece to note is the rates of vaping marijuana or cannabis, which is a growing trend that's also fueling numerous ER visits as well. And moving on to the next slide here. So this graph here shows us that e-cigarette use among high school students reached an all-time high at 27.5% in 2019. However, recent 2020 data show that this number has dropped to 19.6%. So while youth e-cigarette use has decreased in the last year, many young people are reporting vaping nearly every day, underscoring the highly addictive nature of nicotine. And in a new Truth Initiative survey of 1,000 young people, 70% of young people are reporting that they anticipate seeing their peers vape the same or more when they return to school. So that survey was administered last spring. So last spring, 70% of students were projecting to see their peers vape about the same or even more so when returning back to school. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about health effects. We all know the health effects, but it's important to kind of highlight this as we're talking about reasonings for being for prevent you, or I guess administering prevention education. So as mentioned in the chat, e-cigarettes are kind of generally thought of by young people as less harmful to individual health than inhaling smoke from combustible tobacco or from cigarettes or cigars. But they aren't free of toxins, and they still deliver really harmful chemicals for our students, to our youth. And so they still also have really harmful side effects, such as mouth and throat irritation, nausea, headaches, and dry cough. We also don't know the long-term effects for neither users nor those with secondhand exposure. We have, however, started to see some of those short-term effects, and you may have heard about those in the news as well. All right, moving on to our third poll here. So young people who have ever used e-cigarettes, are they 1.5, 3 times, 4.5 times, 5 times, or 7 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes? And you can go ahead and answer that in the chat here. Just take a stab at it. I'm seeing some 7s, some 5s. Absolutely. And yeah, as we're chatting that in, I'm seeing a lot of 7s and 5s. Rachel, you can go ahead and drum roll, please. So those of you that guessed 7, yes, young people who have ever used e-cigarettes are 7 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes, which just kind of, I think it goes to show the pervasiveness and how how addictive nicotine is is as a substance. We'll move on to next slide here, and so we can't kind of stray away from the the inevitable elephant in the room when talking about COVID-19, and just another kind of startling statistic that kind of came across our desk was that the global pandemic is also affecting students that are using e-cigarettes. So young people who are reported ever using e-cigarettes have been found to be 5 times more likely to test positive for COVID-19. So that's just another kind of another layer to all of this as well. And then next slide here, and we'll wrap that up. So it's really important as we're talking about, I know we spent a lot of time talking about vaping and e-cigarettes, but it's really important to look beyond individual substances. And so a key finding here, and this is actually described more in one of our EVERFI webinars with some of our subject matter experts, that prescription drug misuse increases the odds of having 2 or more substance use disorders by the age of 35. So it's really important to kind of look beyond individual substances and talking about prevention education kind of from a more holistic lens. So yeah, I just think it's really important to highlight that one slide. So I am actually going to finish my section here with one last poll before I hand it off to Michelle to talk about our individual resources. So how does your school currently address substance abuse prevention in your curriculum? And you can just respond with letters A, B, C, or D. A being I have solid lessons. B, I have some lessons built into the curriculum, but would like more. C, I touch on it at times, but like more resources. And D, I don't currently, but I'm very interested. All right. I'm seeing some interested in more. I've got some lessons, but always looking for more. Got some B's and C's, lots of B's and C's. So it looks like most of us are interested in learning more. So that's a great segue into to my coworker, Michelle, who is going to talk about some of the resources that are available from EVERFI.
Thank you so much, Erica. I am really excited to share these resources with you all. It looks like we have a really wide range of folks in terms of kind of like where we're at with prevention education. So hopefully this can be something that's useful for everybody. So we'll go ahead and dive in. So what you're looking at here, I know this is a bit of an overwhelming slide, but this, as Rachel talked about at the start of our presentation, we create online resources for teachers to use with their students in a variety of different subject areas. And while today we're focusing on prevention education, you will see all of our other resources here. These are available to you all as well. So if you see something that strikes your eye, feel free to, make a sticky note, and you can always chat with us about it later. But what we'll be focusing the most on today are here under our health and wellness vertical, there in the middle highlighted area. I know we talked a little bit about different grade levels already, and it looks like we have a wide range of folks in different grade levels and positions, but do know that these grade levels that you see listed here are simply suggestions. So don't feel like you're tied to a certain grade level just because of where you're teaching. We can go ahead and move forward. So what you're looking at here, this is a closer view of the 4 resources we highlighted on the previous slide. You'll see our course on vaping in partnership with the Truth Initiative, our mental wellness basics course, alcohol EDU, and prescription drug safety. So you will see that these are mostly late middle school to high school aged, but we have seen these used all the way down to even 7th grade sometimes, just because, as you all know, this is something that the earlier you talk about it, the better. So don't feel like you are limited if you are not seeing, all high school seniors or anything like that. What we're going to do now is do a quick overview of each of these resources. I will warn you ahead of time, this might be a little bit speedy, but we'll have plenty of time to dive into them individually when you create your own EVERFI accounts later. So first, we have Vaping Know the Truth. Again, this is in partnership with the Truth Initiative. Any of you who might have been involved in prevention education over the years probably remember the commercials that you've seen from Truth Initiative over even the last decade or so. I know I remember seeing those when I was in high school. But this course is really taking a prevention forward approach and a peer-to-peer approach with vaping prevention education. So they're going over things, excuse me, like the dangers of vaping, the marketing behind e-cigarette companies, refusal skills, and self-care as well. I know we had some great comments in the chat talking about vaping being a response to stressors in life. So, we need to do more than just telling students to quit. We need to show students how they can support their mental wellness as well. So here are a couple of screenshots from the course themselves. When students log on, you will notice that everything in every EVERFI course is self-paced. This makes it really easy for you to be able to share this out with students, regardless of your teaching position, whether you're a counselor, a social worker, a regular classroom teacher. Students will be able to log on and have the choice of which lesson they want to dive into. So you'll see 3 of them listed here. They give a little blurb talking about what they'll dive into. And then moving forward, once students dive into the actual lessons themselves, you'll see it's very interactive. So like I mentioned earlier, we like to take a peer-to-peer approach. You all working in prevention education, and especially those of you who are guidance counselors, social workers, we know that as adults telling students things, sometimes we are the last person they want to listen to. So this course really does a great job of letting students hear from their peers who have actually had experience with this, who are the same age as them, and really talk to them about this issue and some of the different topics that relate to it. Through here, you'll see they have a piece for reflection. So they get to actually reflect on what they've learned through the course in a safe space. So this is actually a part of the course that is not sent to you as the educator. It's ungraded and completely anonymous. So there's no right or wrong answers here. It's just really a space that we're going to allow students to be able to reflect on everything that they've gone through in the program. So that way they can really set the stage for the skills that they'll be learning as they move forward. And then this section, this is actually one of my favorites. So these are actual student testimonials from students who have used this course. So we're seeing students talk about being able to share facts. They say hit her with facts when they're talking about their sister using nicotine products, and being able to really share all of that information with their loved ones or even themselves. The student up in the top left that says that they'll use this to actually stop vaping. And then the comment there in the middle that says, I like that the videos showed kids my age and their struggle with nicotine. I think it could be really easy for us to, have that foresight and say, no, we know that this is bad for you because we're adults and we've had that experience, but that doesn't really resonate with kids all the time. So being able to let them hear from folks that are going through something similar to them can really resonate a lot more. And then next, we'll move into mental wellness basics here on the next slide. So this is actually one of my favorite EVERFI courses. I've been with EVERFI for just over 4 years, and this is really, I think, one of the most impactful ones for me personally. And we get a lot of great student and teacher feedback from this as well. So this is really exactly what it sounds like, talking about the basics of mental health and mental wellness. So developing positive mindsets, reviewing those coping strategies, how to seek treatment, and learning about the science and the brain behind mental disorders and mental illness. We can go ahead and move forward. So here you'll see a student that's reflecting on the cycle between thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, and developing those healthy coping skills. My favorite part about learning about healthy coping skills is this is something that's relevant to everybody, not only the students who might really be having a serious mental health crisis, but also those high achievers who might not think that they have anything wrong because, hey, I'm getting all A's in school, I'm college bound, I have a job, I have a social life, but really building healthy coping skills is going to be something that's going to be beneficial for everybody. And then through here, you'll be able to see the here on the left side, one of the pre-quizzes that students take as they go through the course. So that way you as an educator can really track their progress and see how they're doing. They get to learn about different scenarios and be able to choose what they would do. We always describe this as like a choose your own adventure format. So students get to see how this might look in real life. So when you choose a certain answer, what might happen next? We know that there's more than just the right and the wrong answer in real life. So we like to have that reflected in our courses as well. And then here in the bottom right, you'll see that they're being asked to talk about a couple of different coping strategies that they've learned about and what they'll do next time they feel stressed. So again, something that's not recorded or submitted, just a space for them to be able to reflect. And then alcohol EDU for high school. This is actually modeled directly off of a college alcohol EDU course that I took when I was in college. And I know we hear from a lot of educators say, hey, I remember taking this when I was in my 2 or 4 year university. But this is really tailored down to a high school age level. So talking about peer pressure, underage drinking laws. This is very, very different than talking to college students about alcohol, where it's legal for them to be drinking, most of them at least. But for high schoolers, this is not something that they should be doing, and really talking about that impact for them. Here you'll see what they see when they click into the course for the very first time. So they're able to look at all of the different lessons and the topics that they'll be covering. So they place a big emphasis on influences, just like we do in the mental wellness course, the vaping course, and our prescription drug safety course, just talking about how your influences can really be pressuring you to do things that maybe aren't aligned with your values. And then giving them skills to be able to make better decisions as they move along. And then moving forward, you'll see a couple of students sharing their own reasons for not drinking, whether that's them not drinking ever or just not drinking until it's legal for them. So you'll see the student on the right saying, well, I support the law. It's not legal for me to be drinking right now, so I'm not going to. Other students might say their own personal experience in their family. Maybe they feel that they don't need that to have fun, or maybe they know that it's not a good way to stay healthy. And then next, talking about how alcohol affects the brain and the body. Students are still developing at this age in high school, and having heavy alcohol use or any alcohol use at all can really be impactful on their health and well-being. So this is talking about how all of that works and how this might have a different impact on you based on your weight, what medications you're on, your biological sex, or other factors like you'll see here. They're talking about whether you've eaten or not before you're drinking. And then next, we'll talk about our prescription drug safety course. So our prescription drug safety course, this course is talking all about those drugs that we were talking about earlier. So things like Adderall or pain relievers that are legal, but only when prescribed to you by your doctor. So not only talking about the legality of everything, but the science behind becoming addicted to these. This is different than doing an illicit drug that you're already talking about in class, but this is actually something that is legal for students and sometimes can be even easier to get. Moving forward, you'll see the 6 lessons that they have to pick from. So the science of addiction, the safe use of prescription drugs. So again, these are not illegal drugs. They're drugs that can be very beneficial to somebody's health and well-being when used properly. On the next page, you'll be able to see how they can read a prescription label. So knowing if something is meant for them or not, and knowing how to read the instructions that are provided to them by a pharmacist or a doctor. And then at the very end, this is a quick screenshot of our refusal skills. So really equipping students with refusal skills. We often see that when we have students take pre-surveys, this is a section that they really are self-reporting, wanting to learn more about. And then our last slide before we transition in, our impact report. So this impact report that we share out with districts every single summer shows the knowledge gain for students that take this course and where they've gone from beginning to end. So you'll see 20% knowledge gain in both science of addiction and supporting a friend modules within the prescription drug safety course, but then also a 50% knowledge gain in refusal skills. So students going from getting really low scores on those skills and behaviors to really feeling a lot more confident, closer to 100% and being able to demonstrate these. And right now, I will go ahead and turn it back to Rachel to help share some implementation strategies and help us get started on the resources.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. Hopefully everyone was able to find something that they may want to take advantage of, especially as we're heading into Red Ribbon Week. Lots of tools at your disposal. And just as a reminder, these are short. These are supplemental lessons. I think alcohol education might be the longest at like 2.5 hours. So these are things you could easily just plug into one class period. So with that, just a couple more slides here before we go into our breakout rooms, but just helping you think a little bit more about implementation strategies. So for example, that first one around extension activity. So maybe you do already have plans when it comes to Red Ribbon Week, or maybe those are in formation right now. Again, you could pull from one or multiple of the EVERFI resources that you heard from Michelle and just insert those. Again, 1 to 2 class periods could really go a long way to covering these really important topics. What's really awesome about the resources is, and we've really focused on the online pieces, is that we also have all of this really rich offline lessons that go along with each of our online components. And typically it's usually matched like lesson per lesson. So for one online lesson, you'll have like another offline lesson that kind of supports it and continues that conversation. So maybe you have students go through the online resource one day, and then you use class discussion time to use the offline resources to continue the conversation, right? And get students really talking to each other about these really important topics. Another example could be the flipped classroom model, right? You could have students take maybe mental wellness basics when they're at home for homework, assigning that for the 60 minutes of homework, and then they come in together at school and they go through the discussion guides, or they go through that extension lesson together. And then finally, you could utilize this as a capstone or a Red Ribbon Week project. We actually have a Red Ribbon Week toolkit that we are going to get you all access to at the end, or show you how you can get access to it. That is going to be comprised of a lot of great things. So let me show you what those are. I've gotten ahead of myself here. My keyboard's a little jumpy here. Here we go. So you'll have the offline resources. So all of those programs Michelle highlighted, we have offline content with that. That will be bundled into the toolkit. We'll also have articles and additional research. We'll have those discussion guides, and we'll have the IDEA resources around vaping and e-cigarettes. posters, things that you can print for your office, you know, the counseling office, for example, goal worksheet. So much stuff is going to go into this. So again, we'll show you how you can get access to that at the end. So this is all in addition to the online modules. I also wanted to highlight really quickly a scholarship opportunity that we have available at EVERFI, which is if a student takes at least 3 lessons of an EVERFI resource, and that can be a combination of different programs, by the way, and completes the 300 to 500 word essay, and we do have all that information linked here in the bonus lesson plan, then they can apply for one of our $1,000 scholarships. So definitely something to look out for, and that can be either through our fall scholarship opportunity or our spring. So we kind of have 2 rounds every year. And I know we're really focusing on the prevention tools, but I did want to highlight just super briefly the resources that we just launched recently, as well as the ones that are forthcoming, in case that these are, again, useful for the students that you support or maybe your colleague across the hall. So we have Data Science Foundations and Healthcare Literacy have both launched. They launched at the end of the summer. We also are launching very soon an additional module into EVERFI Financial Literacy all around an interactive tax simulation. So that's where we've taken an existing program and added a module to it. So that's going to be coming out soon. And then our savings and retirement course as well. So again, something to flag for you in the event that you work especially around financial literacy with your students, or again, if you have another colleague who could benefit from this, you can share this information with them as well. And lastly, I want to make sure to mention SOPA. If SOPA is top of mind for you, in that you know that your district doesn't yet have a SOPA agreement in place with us, I did want to highlight the 3 different options that your district has to getting that agreement in place with us. And I do know that there's usually like a designated person or a group that works on this at each district. So I did include my email address, again, in the event you want to connect me with that group or that team that's working on it so we can get this finalized. We know this just went into effect July 1, and we are working, you know, to ensure that every district has this with us. So we're just trying to take that proactive you know, stance and get those agreements in. So again, email me at rhenry@everfi.com. If you want to, you know, check in on this and get that signed. All right, so we're going to transition now into getting started with EVERFI. I think we have about 15 minutes here before we all come back together about 4:25. So I did want to pause to show you this slide. So if everyone could take a look to see if your district is listed. These districts on the screen have synced with us through Clever, meaning these districts have access to Clever and have the EVERFI app embedded in the Clever dashboard. So again, if you're finding your district here, this is really important because you will be going to the Clever integrated breakout session. If your district is not listed here, you will go to the non-Clever breakout. So I'm going to repeat that again. If your district is listed here, you're going to the Clever integrated. If your district's not listed, you're going to non-Clever integrated. Quick highlight on Chicago Public Schools. This only applies to networks 1 through 17. So if you're not at a network 1 through 17 school in Chicago, then you're going to go into the non-Clever. So the Clever is for CPS is only networks 1 through 17. So take one more glance here. These should be in alphabetical order. And again, if you end up in the wrong breakout, we can always move you as well. So no worries at that.